So now that we have a basic concept, we can send this to somebody who matters, who will be approving this, a client, yourself, if it's a personal project, and kind of just make sure you're happy with the overall layout. And once you're happy with the layout and you got some approval, we could start to prepare this for the real printing process. So one of the first things I do is I'm going to toggle on W, and I'm going to make sure there's nothing past my margins. Of course, your margins may be greater, and I do like thick margins, especially on the cover, because all sorts of printing mistakes can happen, and it's nice to have a lot of margin there. So when I do this, I just like to shift things over just a little bit so that the is a little close for comfort, just shifting it over just a tad to make sure there's nice spacing in the margin. I did add a barcode. You can Google and find a barcode you can add in there. It's just a simple barcode I found online just to kind of emulate a real barcode. We probably would put a price and all that as well on the barcode. So just making sure that has enough margin. Just going around the edges, this would be a problem right here. This little October, we just need to make sure that is within the margin, which is the pink line. And that means we may need to thicken this bar just a little bit and toggle off W to see how it looks. Good to have nice margins. And another thing we could do is make sure our photo goes all the way to the bleed. So in this case, I just need to drag it over and drag it over because that bleed will be required by the printer. Just preparing our document. We also want to go down to our article and make sure everything is off to the bleed, which it looks like it is. All the photos go off to the bleed. Just going down, looking at everything. This looks like there's nothing there. There's like some, I think that's when I faded the photo. That's not a big deal. I can fix that. And a box there. Just making sure my bleed looks consistent too. Sending it to the back. So yeah, there we go. Now it's bleed all the way around. Making sure everything is within the margin. Also, this is where the magazine is going to fold. So I don't want to make it this E too close to where it folds. Okay, so just doing some final checks. You also want to go in and make sure there's the same spacing between this column and the end, or right where your bleed is ending, right there. So you want to make sure that's the same size as that, and you want to make sure there's nice, even spacing in your margins. It's really, really important. Okay, so if I feel like I'm ready to export, we can go ahead and get this exported as a print-ready PDF. So there's one thing we want to make sure before we export any magazine or anything that we do in InDesign. So we want to go down here to this area, this little green thing that says no errors. Sometimes there's errors such as missing typefaces and fonts and missing photos that are not properly linked up. If you go up here to links, let's go over here to links. Here's links. This is all of the photos that are linked in here. And sometimes if you delete a photo or if you move a photo on your desktop and it was linked, sometimes these can get unlinked and you have to right click and relink them, but that error will appear here. So make sure you don't have any errors in your pre-flight panel. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this little arrow and I just went to pre-flight panel and I'm just making sure there's no errors. There's nothing to worry about. So I'm just going to go ahead and click off of pre-flight and I'm going to export this. Okay, so we're going to do print. We're not going to do interactive. That'll probably save it in RGB mode. We want to do print and then export. So with here, there should be a default. What we've been doing with most of them is press quality. So we're going to click on press quality and we are going to make sure that pages are selected. So when you do export a magazine and it's multiple pages, do not do spreads. Spreads are great for looking at it and reviewing it and correcting it. But in terms of the printer is going to want to see it in single pages. That's how they like it. It's how they require you to submit multiple page magazines, booklets, catalogs, etc. So just make sure pages is selected. We're just making sure everything looks good in terms of resolution. Usually the press quality defaults are great. Okay, with marks and bleed, we definitely want to add crop marks. We want to add our crop marks sometimes. Sometimes magazine printers either like crop marks or they don't. Just ask them. Sometimes I include crop marks, sometimes I don't. But definitely bleed. We want to have our bleed marks on there. And since we already added bleed when we open the document, all we have to do is click on Use Bleed Settings and it will do it. So sometimes they like this checked. Sometimes they don't. So just kind of ask them what they like to have exported in the PDF. Output, we want to make sure CMYK is selected. That is a great color profile to be in when you're printing. And that's it. We're ready to go. We could even save this preset if we don't want to have to do all the same settings again, if we're going to do something very similar in the future. So let's go ahead and export. So one thing I want to talk about is, let's say I want to hand this off to another designer. I want to sell this layout. I want to be able to give an editable file to the printer. There's a lot of reasons why you want to give an editable file to somebody. And so I'm going to show you a way to package files. This is the best way to send around a file, InDesign file that you want other people to be able to fully edit. So if I were to save this, it's just a regular InDesign file. So I'm going to go ahead and do this. And there it is right here. It's just an InDesign file. If I were to send this InDesign file to somebody, they wouldn't have any of the fonts. They wouldn't have any of the photos that we embedded in there. They would just have everything blocked out, but they wouldn't have the linked up photos and files. They wouldn't have any of this in your links. And so everything would be disconnected. They wouldn't be able to edit it. So what we need to do is create an InDesign package. I'm going to go up to File and go down to something called Package. And this is going to package the InDesign file along with all the fonts used as well as all of the linked up photos. So this is all the fonts that are going to be exported. So there's certain protected fonts that you may not have a license for. And all of these I have a license for, so it's all protected. There is one typeface that is protected. So if I were to export this Victor script, I would not be able to package it up because I just have a demo. I don't have the full license for this typeface. So you can outline the type on here, or you can purchase that license and then you'll have the protection, or find another typeface that doesn't have a license, that's not protected. It's just our script type, so we can just go in, change this to another script type that we do have a license for. You know, that's not my favorite one, but just kind of showing you how to just address that issue. So now I'm going to go back up to Package, and now everything is going to be, now that I got rid of Vicar, all the fonts will be exported properly. So I'm just going back and just double checking things, making sure all these photos look good. But most of the time I just go ahead and package if I feel like everything is good to go. All right, so let's go ahead and package. And we must save it, so let's go ahead and save it since we made a change. So this will be a packaged InDesign for our magazine. So we're going to want to copy the fonts because they may not have the fonts installed on their computer, copy the linked graphics, which will be the photos, update the graphic links in the package. All that by default is great. So let's go ahead and package it up. So that's why it's great to have a font subscription. I have the Adobe Creative Cloud subscription, so I get access to all these fonts. So if there's one that I run across that's licensed, I can always swap it out with one that is licensed. Okay, so here's the package. It's going to be a folder. So I'm going to double click it and you can zip this folder up and send it to anybody you want, including the printer if they require it. But I have all my links, so I have all these photos that we edited and used. It's going to have the original InDesign file. It's going to have a PDF so you can double check. So it went ahead and exported our PDF. And it also gives us all of the document fonts that we have the licenses for. It's not going to include any we don't have the license for. So if you package it up, they'll be able to open it up just like you did in your computer and take over the project. So if you ever wanted to produce a magazine design and sell it online, this is kind of how you would sell it. Or if you wanted to hand it off to another designer or an ad agency or hand it off to your client, this is a great way to do it. So I wanted to kind of show you that. I know that's a little tedious, a little boring, but it's essential to really understand how to maximize InDesign because this is our first and our only project that we're going to be doing in InDesign, and I really wanted to review it. So here's our final magazine. I'm pretty happy with kind of how it looks and feels. There's always tweaks you could do, little things you can do with the layout, but overall, for this example, for the 45 minutes that we had to create the cover, I'm happy with it. Also the spread, I'm happy with how everything seems thematic. Everything seems connected with the front cover and the inside spread. You could tell the same person put it together and they're thinking about similar font choices, but it's not too matchy-matchy either. There's a little bit of distinct quality to the article as opposed to the front cover. So I hope you enjoyed this project. It's our big editorial project of this class. I hope you liked it. And layout design is one of the most difficult parts of learning graphic design because you're dealing with so many elements. It is like putting together a puzzle piece, but just taking some of the foundations and fundamentals you have learned throughout this class with font pairing and type hierarchy and just ways to balance out your design, I think it can go really far in helping you create more professional, polished layout pieces.